2007 through 2011 Honda CR-V alternator replacement. I'm Brian Eslick from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing out the alternator. Alternator that I'm going to be using is a Denso remanufactured alternator. I will link it up in the description of the video. I also decided to go ahead and replace the serpentine belt. The belt on this vehicle was in bad shape, so I went ahead and opted to change it out. To get started, we're going to disconnect the negative battery cable and we're going to tuck the cable off to the side. We don't want this to come back and make contact with the post. Next, we need to get the front of the vehicle off the ground. So if you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and jack stands. Jack it up high enough where you can crawl under it. You're going to remove the passenger front wheel and then the inner splash shield here. We're going to pull these clips out and we're going to pull the splash shield down with this little plastic shield down that gives us access to the belts and stuff. Also, you need to go right here on the corner and remove a 10mm bolt and a few more clips. And the more of this plastic shield you pull down, the easier it is to see and work around. So go ahead and pull that down. Now we need to remove the serpentine belt. There's a few tool options. There's a serpentine belt tool, or what I'm going to use is these extra long mountain wrenches. They're 18 inches long. The serpentine belt tool is made by Gear Wrench. It's a pretty inexpensive tool and it's very useful and helpful, not just on this job but other jobs. So the tool I'm going to use is the 14mm extra long flex head ratcheting wrench here. It's about 18 inches long. I'm doing it from underneath, so if I'm going to reach up here and put the 14mm head of it right on the tensioner, and I'm going to torque the tensioner over. You can do this also from up top. You can get to it from up top or the bottom. I like getting it from below. It's a little easier. So I put the wrench on the tensioner, and now I'm going to torque it counterclockwise, and that's going to spring the tension off the belt, and I can slip the belt off. As you can see, this belt's not in the best shape, so I'm going to replace it. These grooves here are kind of deep, and that's how they wear. They don't get the usual cracks like they used to get. So I printed out a diagram of how the belt is routed. It's courtesy of AllData. And as you can see, they came from the top to loosen up the belt, but I found it easier to go from the bottom. Now we're going to go back up top and we're going to remove the power steering reservoir from its bracket here. So you squeeze a little tab here and you can pull the reservoir up and out of the bracket. We're not going to disconnect any of the hoses. We're just going to tuck it off to the side like this. Now we're going to take this bracket off. So there's a 10mm bolt down below on the right, and then there's a second 10mm bolt on the left we're going to remove. Once you get the two bolts removed from the bracket, now you can just lift the bracket out and set it aside. So we remove that bracket so we can get access to a bolt here on the power steering pump. But before we get to that, we need to disconnect the hose that's mounted on the bracket. I just used a flat blade screwdriver right here and put it in the little clamp here that's holding it on. So I just put it in between the two little tabs on the clamp, give it a little twist, and it popped it open. And now I can take the hose off like this and set this aside now. So now we have access to the power steering pump. We're going to remove this 12mm bolt here. I just used a extension and a deep socket like this, cracked it free and spun the bolt out. So the bottom bolt is a little harder to get to. You have to feel for it. It's right underneath the pulley there. I'm just using a deep socket with a little short extension, cracked it free like this, reached under there and spun the bolt out. After that, we can take the pump and the reservoir that's still connected with all the hoses, and we're just going to lift it upwards and kind of pull it up and tuck it over the AC line, and now that gives us complete access to the alternator below it. So I just pulled it up and hooked it over the top of the AC line there. Now we're going to unplug the electrical connector, the green connector here. Just squeeze the tab and pull it off and tuck it off to the side. Now we're going to start unbolting this. So there's 3 bolts on the alternator. We're going to take those bolts off, and here's a diagram of where they're mounted. There's 2 on the bottom, 1 on the top. I'm using a 12mm ratchet like this. You can either go over the top like this and get to the bolts, or what you can do is crawl from underneath, and looking from upwards you can get to the 2 bolts on the bottom. So you want to remove the 2 bottom bolts first and then the top bolt, and then there will have access to get to the final electrical connector on the alternator. So go ahead and crack these 2 bolts free. If you're having trouble getting the bolts from up top, you can go from underneath the vehicle, and just above the AC compressor here is the alternator. You can see it there, and you can see the 12mm bolts. So I'm using a flex head ratchet to get the first one on the far passenger side free. Go ahead and crack that free, and you can spin that bolt out. And then I stuck my hand up inside there and removed the second bolt. And then I went back up top, removed the third and final bolt. Now we can pull the alternator out like this and get to the electrical connector. You need to flare the little rubber boot back, and then underneath it will be a nut. Remove that nut, Once you get the positive terminal off the back of the alternator, it's going to be held on with a wire loom holder here. You can do it either way. You can try to pop the wire loom holder out, or do what I did was take an 8mm socket and remove the bracket that it's mounted onto. It's just one little screw or nut. Just remove that nut, and then you can pull the wire loom holder off like this. Once you get the wire loom holder off, now the alternator is free and you can lift it straight up. You may have to twist it and arc it in some different angles to get it to come out. So now that you got the alternator out, you want to match up your old one with your new one. I'm going to transfer over this bracket here. Actually, I'm going to just take it off and leave it off, and I'm just going to reuse the old bracket here. So I'm going to take it off the new alternator, and now I'm going to feed the new alternator down into position. So you'll just let gravity do the work. You kind of arc it and turn it till you find that right angle where it goes in. And once you get it in there, then you can go ahead, before you mount the bolts up, you put the electrical connectors on. So you put the wire loom holder bracket on and bolt that up in the wire loom. When you go to tighten up the positive lead here, you don't want to over tighten that. It's really easy for it to snap the terminal off. So just snug it up. Reinstall the rubber boot that went over it. Then you can go ahead and plug in the green electrical connector onto the terminal. Once you got that all plugged in, now you can mount the top bolt first, start it a few threads. Now you can go ahead and install the two bottom bolts. If you did it from the top, do it from the top. I'm going to go back underneath here and start the two bolts. And as you can see, I'm tightening up the one bolt, and this is how I got to it. So I reached around with a little wrench, and it's just above the AC line there. So I cracked it free that way, and I also tightened it back up that way. Now that you have all the bolts started, go ahead and tighten them all down, all three of them. Now that the alternator is resecured and the electrical connectors are plugged in, we can take the power steering pump here and flip it back over and feed it down into position. And we're going to start the two bolts and tighten those down. Once you got those two bolts started and tightened back down, we're going to leave the reservoir bracket off for now. We're going to go ahead and install the serpentine belt. And here's the diagram that is provided by All Data. I printed out for you guys. So you're going to route the belt the way the diagram shows. So I routed the belt from the top down. So I came up from the top and pulled the reservoir out of my way, fed the belt down there and routed it according to the diagram and put it on from underneath. You can do it the opposite way. It doesn't matter. So you can go from the bottom and go up, or from the top and go down, just whatever you're comfortable working with. So I routed it around all the pulleys the way the diagram shows. Now I'm going to put my my ratcheting wrench on here. I will link this up in the description of the video along with all the other tools. Torch it over to the left and put the belt on. Now I can take this splash shield and put that back into position and put the clips back in it and re-secure it. Once that's all re-secured, then you can put the tire on. You can torque it down to 79 foot-pounds. Once the tire is torqued, now what we're going to do is put the reservoir bracket back in. So you're going to feed it down into position, start the two bolts, and then once you got the two bolts started and secure, we're going to put the little hose clamp back on, and then we're going to slide the reservoir back onto the bracket. So once you get it all mounted up, you want to slide it back into the bracket, make sure it's secure, and make sure all the hoses are properly mounted and not going to rub the belt or anything like that. You don't want anything like that to happen. Now you're ready to reconnect the negative battery cable, and I'm going to show you how to reset the clock. And also your radio may be in anti-theft mode where the radio is not working, so you have to enter a code in it. So that code 9 times out of 10 is located right here on the side of the glove box. There's a little sticker if you pull the glove box down, and right there will be the code for the radio. The sticker's not always there. Sometimes you have to look for it in the owner's manual, or you may have to call your dealer to find the code. So now we're going to enter that code. So we're going to enter that 5-digit code right here using the numbers on the radio. So each number represents one of the numbers on the sticker. So you'll enter all those in, and once you get them all 5 entered in, then the radio will power up. Now the radio is active, and you can program your radio stations if you need to be. I believe these managed to stay in there, so no further programming was needed. Now we're going to reset the clock. If you look right here, there's the clock. What we need to do is push the clock button right here, just below the AM button here. So you'll push it until the clock starts flashing. So you see the 12:10 there flashing. So now that it's flashing, you're going to look for the H and the M. That's the H is the minutes or hours, and you're going to push that until you set it to your desired time. And the M is the minutes, so you'll push that until you get to your desired time. Once you get it set to the correct time, then you'll just push the clock button one more time, and that'll set it. One last thing you want to do is hook up a voltmeter and make sure the vehicle is charging at the proper charge rate. I will link up all the parts and tools that I use in this video in the description. If you're interested in supporting the How to Automotive YouTube channel, the best way you can do that is by purchasing t-shirts, coffee mugs, and stickers. I will leave links for that all in the description of the video. I'm Brian Eslick from How to Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this, and I'd like to thank you again for watching.